There is definitely a little bit of something for everyone on this next episode of Why the Hell Am I Here? Mostly due to the fact that my next guest has quite the range of hobbies, talents, and vocations. For example, right now he serves as the law director for the city of Galion, the owner/publisher of a local media conglomerate, and a church organist. That's not even counting the 2 years he spent living in Paris, France with the Mormon faith, or the time he spent in the best damn band in the land. Ohio State fans will know exactly what I'm talking about. We've been Twitter friends for a while now, but I really enjoyed getting to know Thomas Palmer in the real world, and I hope you will too. Now, before we dive into our actual interview, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you to one of the generous newsroom partners supporting the Why the Hell Am I Here podcast, Spherion Staffing. Their job is finding jobs, and they love what they do, which is something we both have in common. Without the support of Spherion, the solutions journalism work we do at Richland Source, including this podcast, just wouldn't be possible. For more information about Spherion, our newsroom partners, and our solutions journalism work, visit richlandsource.com/solutions. From the Richland Source Podcast Network, welcome to Why the Hell Am I Here? A podcast that hopes to answer the big and small questions about where you are in life, where you've been, and where you're going. I'm your host, Brittany Schock. Hey guys, welcome back to the Why the Hell Am I Here podcast. Today in the podcast studio, we have someone who should be my mortal enemy because he's from Michigan, but it's okay. We're going to give him a pass. We have Thomas Palmer, who is currently the law director for the city of Galion. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brittany. Good to be here.
Yeah. You are yet another elected official that I'm having on the podcast, which I honestly just occurred to me because I don't know why, but I don't think of the law directors being elected, but you are, right?
Yeah, in Galion, that's not true in every city, but for Galion, yeah, we're elected in Galion.
Yeah, and you're starting your second, you're like right at the beginning in the first year of your second term, right?
Right, I'm in my 10th month of my second 4-year term.
Gotcha. Enjoying it so far?
Yeah, absolutely. My job is one which is different every single day.
Yeah.
So there were periods that I really enjoy it, and then there was challenging periods as well. But I think that's true for many jobs.
I think so too. And journalism's totally like that too. I never know. But that's why I like it. Thomas, I want to mention really quick, your brother is doing something really cool right now as we speak, and I feel like we should talk about it because it's
super.
I mean, it's really awesome. So
yes.
Tell everyone what he's doing right now.
Well, my brother Scott, who is, I have 3 brothers, and he is the middle of the others. He is currently in Nepal, and he has been there for a handful of days, and he will be there for about 2 more weeks. And he and his team are tackling the climb to the Mount Everest base camp, and they're going to be climbing a couple of peaks near Mount Everest. And I've been getting pictures every day, and I've been sharing as many as I can on social media, and I'm really proud of him. But he is undertaking this incredible journey with a team from they're all from the Ogden, Utah area, and I'm very, very excited to see where he's been and what he's doing. And I would never do it in a million years, but God bless him for the effort.
Yeah, there was a little bit of frost on my car this morning, and I was already miserable, so I can't imagine like climbing up Everest or anything like that. But that's really cool. I've never known anyone who even attempted to get near Everest. So
nor have I. And one of the things I admire about Scott is that he is someone who really embraces life in all of its aspects. If he has a passion he loves, he really goes at it.
Yeah.
I was telling you earlier that Scott not only is a mountain climber, and he has brought up his son in the same kind of avocation. He is also a member of the Utah Opera Chorus, so he's an opera singer and a mountain climber.
So, like, when he gets to his destination, is he going to sing at the top? Or
He does.
Yeah.
No. All kidding
gosh.
aside, he has done that before when he's climbed to a peak in Utah.
Wow.
His big thing with his son is to share a bag of Skittles when they get to the top. But I think
That
he sings
is
too.
really cool. That's really cool. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because we talked about how you're musical yourself, your whole family's musical. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to dive into. Thomas, you're a very interesting person, so I'm excited.
Well, thank you.
Typical of Why the Hell Am I Here? We're going to start at the beginning, right?
Okay.
Which, you were born in Michigan, that state up north. Which,
It was.
But, you also graduated from the Ohio State University with your law degree. So
Eventually,
there's
yes,
a
I
very,
did.
I'm conflicted.
Well, and I understand that, and it's something I don't admit to all the time, and particularly with people like you, Brittany, who I know are OSU fans, and I am an OSU fan.
Yeah.
Really quick story about that. I was in my freshman year at the Ohio State University in Columbus. I was a member of the Ohio State marching band,
Okay.
and there's a thing called the Skull Session, which happens in
yes.
St. John Arena before every game. And on one particular occasion during the Skull Session, they asked for a handful of people from the band to come up to the front and stand in a line. I don't remember how many it was, maybe 5 to 10, but I was mortified when my name was included, and not knowing what it was going to be. And we got up there, and they announced that they had done some research into our student records and found that we were all born in the state up north.
Oh, no.
And they wanted us to basically atone for that sin. And I remember one of them, my mother and I were just talking about this the other day. She remembers that occasion. One of them explained that he had been born in Michigan, but once his parents found out that he could actually play an instrument and walk at the same time, that they decided they had to move to Ohio. So
Has to be part of the best damn band in the land, right?
exactly, and I'm a very proud member of TBITL, which is the Ohio
Yes.
State Marching Band Alumni Association, and I was just at OSU for a year, and then I went to Bowling Green for 2 years, and I was in the band there, which I loved. But yeah, so I'm an OSU fan.
Yeah.
Not a Michigan fan, but I have to declare my Michigan native status once in a while.
Well, I think that's forgivable then. If you were a Michigan fan, then we might have words. But being
No.
born there, that's not your fault. So.
No, it wasn't. I had nothing to do with it, I guarantee you.
So, born in Michigan, but Thomas, you said you moved around a lot as a kid.
I did. We moved. The typical way I present that when people ask me about that is when I was 15, we moved to Galion for the third time in my life. And I lived in 6 different states and I think 10 to 12 different houses. So my entire childhood was spent making friends, losing friends, making friends, losing friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have some, not issues, but I mean, that informs my life still.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to please. I'm always trying to make people happy with me. And I think that comes from that experience. But yeah, I moved around a lot.
I mean, can I ask why? Like, I grew
Sure.
up in Dayton next to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So
Yes.
I had a lot of friends who, were in and out because of that.
Right.
So normally people, when they have that lifestyle, it's because of the military. Is that the case or no?
No.
No.
My father was one of these people who constantly was on the lookout for the next best job opportunity.
Oh, okay.
And he was involved in, it's not very glamorous, the solid waste industry. He was he was an engineer, and he and his company designed garbage trucks.
Designed garbage trucks. Okay.
And some of the major innovations I happen to know this being his son,
Yeah.
some of the major innovations in solid waste refuse equipment, garbage trucks, occurred in Galion.
Really?
A company called Peabody Galion. And the rear loader garbage truck where you put the garbage in the back and the arm comes down and scoops it back up into a container, that was perfected in Galion.
Wow.
And my father is on one of the people on the patents for that. So
Holy crap. Who knew?
Yeah.
Pun intended, but holy crap. Like, that's really cool.
yeah, that's great.
Things that you just never knew about. I mean, I never knew that about Galion, so that's really awesome. But you ended up landing in Galion to graduate from high school, at least, right?
Yeah, amazingly, all 5 of us children graduated from the same high school, and it was
Wow.
Galion High School. And I'm proud Galion grad.
Yeah. So you live there now. Do you remember it, like, from your childhood and, like, how things changed in the last, couple of decades?
It's dramatic. It's the whole thing we've seen in Mansfield and Marion and so many cities around here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a common story in Galion, maybe even a little more so in Galion because Galion had some very strong industries that were also in the technology industry of its time. telecommunications, and a lot of research and development jobs were there. So when the bottom dropped out and these companies moved to Tennessee or to Mexico or closed entirely, Galion was impacted tremendously. And a lot of ways it's a different community, in a lot of ways it's the same. But yeah, I was there for both.
That's interesting. I mean, I'm just learning so much. Like, never knew that Galion. Of course, I'm not from this area, so that is kind of part of it as well. But yeah, I never knew Galion was like a tech center. Really
was. I mean, the dial tone.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is true. It's sort of urban legend in Galion, but the dial tone was invented in Galion.
Oh my gosh.
So that was part of it. That's the urban legend. But certainly, telephone switchboards were invented in Galion.
I gotta say, I would not expect that from like knowing the city how I know it now. So,
well, yeah, there you go.
Whatever that's worth.
Yeah, but it's still the same town. I mean, it's still the same vibe.
Mm-hmm.
It's still an optimistic community that is looking to the future.
Yeah. So did you go to Ohio State then because of the band? I mean, was that what drew you there? Or?
In part, I would say I was a music major. I
Yeah.
auditioned at music schools around Ohio and shopped scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up going to OSU and marched in the band that year. Had a great time. I was in the very first ever Double Script Ohio.
Ooh, that's fun.
And I was also in the very first Script Ohio performed at a World Series game.
Awesome. What instruments did you play?
I was a sousaphone player.
Sousaphone. Okay. And then transferred to Bowling Green.
I did. Yep.
Which, ironically enough, I went to Ohio State. My brother went to Bowling Green, so that's kind of funny. After that, you ended up going way out of town for a little while.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. How did you end up traveling around Europe for a little while?
I wouldn't necessarily say I traveled around Europe. It was just one of those things that happen in life.
Mm-hmm.
I became, and people see them walking down the street in Mansfield and other places, these young men in white shirts and ties and name tags, missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a Mormon in college, and I went on a 2-year mission. You don't know where you're going to be called to. Literally have no idea. It could be Topeka, it could be Tacoma, it could be Tokyo. You don't know. And I opened up my mission call, and lo and behold, I was called to Paris, France.
Wow.
So I spent most of 2 years in France.
So what called you to the Mormon faith in college then? Because did you grow up that way? Or?
No.
Okay.
My parents are Protestants, and I grew up in going to church every Sunday. It's a really long story about how I became a Mormon, and it's a kind of a long story. But the bottom line is I ended up there, and I was in the LDS Church for several years.
Mm-hmm.
But remember I mentioned before my brother kind of goes to all aspects of life and then puts himself in it. I'm that way too.
Yeah.
So it's like I didn't want to be in halfway. I wanted to experience everything. So I went on a mission myself and got to know French people, got to know French culture, spoke French fluently. Got to the point after about a year where I started to dream in French.
I think that's not how you know you're really in.
I think that is true.
Can you still speak it?
Yes, absolutely.
How would you say "Why the hell am I here" in French?
Oh no, I'm not gonna curse in French. But I like it's typical for a foreign language speaker when you're young. If you're really immersed in it, you really are able to understand and to read it and to listen to it and know what's going on. I listen to French radio all the time, but speaking it is a little bit more of a challenge.
Sure. I have to say, I took about 6 years of Spanish, and I
Great.
still feel like I don't have a grasp on it because I never had that immersive experience with it. So,
right.
I don't know. I don't know if that's just how my brain works. It's like math is the same way. It just goes in one ear and out the other. I can't absorb it at all. So
Okay.
But that's interesting. So was it, you talked about like the guys in the white shirts with the name tags walking around, knocking on people's doors. Is that basically what you did in Paris?
Yeah, 50 to 60 hours a week.
Wow.
And you're trying to basically, just calling it what it is. We were trying to sell religion, trying to sell a faith in a foreign language.
Wow. Huh.
So I have a ton of experiences from that. And I made some incredible friendships that I maintain to this day, even though I'm no longer in the church. I have some wonderful Mormon friends. I even have some people I knew in France that are still friends of mine.
Wow, that's
on Facebook.
great.
Yeah.
That's great. So you were there for 2 years, right?
Better part of 2 years.
Better part of 2 years. And what happened after that?
My parents had moved, surprise, surprise, my parents had moved from Galion again, and they had moved to San Antonio, Texas. Mm-hmm. So I went home to a place I'd never been and lived in San Antonio for the next 2 years, worked in a variety of jobs, including in a classical music store, mm-hmm. which I loved. And I was a disc jockey at Trinity University's radio station, classical music disc jockey. I had the Sunday morning show.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I was also the voice of the San Antonio cable television system because it was that station that they carried on the station, on the channels that didn't have programming.
Why do you say unfortunately?
Because everybody knew my voice. I would go around and they would recognize my voice. I don't know. I shouldn't say unfortunately. It was just a bit intimidating, I guess.
Well, yeah. Well, that's funny. I always think that, radio stars don't have that problem because, you don't see their faces ever. But apparently the voice is that distinctive. Then you have to be silent in public, right?
I certainly have a face for radio, but and I have a face for podcasting, too, as I've discovered. But yeah, I suppose it's that way in a little bit of a small way for me. But I was in San Antonio for 2 years, and I moved to Salt Lake City, mm-hmm. and ended up working at another music store. And then I got a job at American Express, which changed my life.
Yeah.
American Express is a wonderful company, and the reason it changed my life was that the lady that hired me, within maybe a year and a half, I was dating. I was dating my boss. It was very scandalous. It was a workplace romance. And I ended up marrying her. And that was my wife. And we ended up having 2 children. Unfortunately, I was only married for 10 years. When my children were 9 and 4, my wife passed away. She had a very short 5-month battle with cancer. Mm. And she was an incredible person. She was the vice president of Bank One. And she was the way I talk about my wife is she was the second highest ranking female at Bank One Corporation, which had about 15 to 20,000 employees.
Wow.
It's now part of Chase.
Mm-hmm.
She was the second highest ranking woman that didn't have a 4-year college degree. So she was completely self-made. It was just her personality, her skill set, and her performance that people recognized.
Wow.
And
that's amazing.
And she picked me.
Life-changing indeed, then. Wow.
Yes, it was.
So after, you said that you ended up coming back to Ohio to finish, or not to finish law school, but to start law school,
Correct.
Right? At the Ohio State University again.
Correct.
Was that, I'm assuming your wife moved with you at that point? Or
Yes, absolutely.
So you guys were living in Ohio and stuff?
Yes.
So why come back to Ohio? I mean, you've lived all these places and stuff, and, to come back to Ohio and come back to Galion after living in France and Utah and San Antonio, why here?
There's 2 answers to that. One is we were predisposed to come back to the Midwest anyway. Mm-hmm. My wife was from a small town about Galion-sized north of Milwaukee in Wisconsin, and we loved the thought of raising our children in the Midwest. Our son was born just about 3 or 4 months before I graduated with my undergraduate degree from the University of Utah. And so that was one thing. The Midwest was at top on our list. The other thing was just a practical thing. I applied at many, many law schools. I was accepted at many of them. And then it became just like it was for undergraduate, shopping for the best deal.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up picking OSU. It was a joint decision.
Mm-hmm.
And she came and found a job with Bank One, and that's how she started at Bank One.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be, right? I mean, you're moving across the country. So that has to be a decision, a discussion, right? When you're talking about making a joint decision.
Yep.
Can't make those decisions alone anymore, huh?
No, you can't, especially when you have children.
Yeah.
And we had one as we were moving, and then our daughter was born the year after I started practicing law.
Big decisions and big transitions
Yes.
at that point in your life.
Yes.
You're married, you have kids, you're starting a brand new career.
Yes.
Can you remember that time? Was it chaotic?
Yes, it was chaotic, but we were a team, and we handled it really, really well.
Yeah.
I think anyone who knows us in our extended families would tell you we handled it well.
Yeah.
We did pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it worked pretty well. I don't remember it as being chaotic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just life, right, at that point.
It was life. It was like living life, and we both loved that idea of just jumping into things, and it didn't intimidate us at all to move 1,000 miles.
That intimidates me, so good on ya.
Okay.
Why law school? Why go back to law school?
That's a really good question, and I wish I had a great answer for it, and I've certainly been asked that a million times. But literally, I sat in my bedroom one day in San Antonio and said, "I want to plot out my life, and I'm a maker of lists.
Yeah,
that is who I am. I am among the things I am is a maker of lists." And I sat down and said, "I want a means to a better life." I was living at home. I didn't like that. No one does in their 20s. Let's face it. And I thought, what can I do that would not necessarily mean that it would have to be beholden to one thing, but that would give me a lot of open doors, and I would find opportunity along the way. And I thought, well, maybe law school would do that. So I set out a path to reach that end. Mm-hmm. So moving to Utah and working in American Express was part of that, because American Express paid for my undergraduate education.
Okay.
And then, so law school was just, I wanted to start it and see how I would do. Mm-hmm. And I love being an attorney. Yeah. I really do. It matches my personality. I am a troubleshooter by nature, and especially my present job with the city of Galion, that's what I do, mm-hmm. is to deal with crises and they're not all crises. Sometimes they're positive things, but things that have to be taken apart and look how they're made and then put them together in a legal and common sense way.
Right, yeah. So, okay, we have graduated from law school. You said you were in private practice for a long time.
Yes.
Eventually was elected law director in Galion.
Yes.
And I know that around that time was when you first made your first connections with Richland Source. But before we dive into this second half of the story, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from our newsroom partners and the people who help make Why the Hell Am I Here possible. And then we'll be right back. The solutions journalism work we do at Richland Source, including the Why the Hell Am I Here podcast, would not be possible without the support of our newsroom partners, including PR Machine Works, Nanogate, DRM, the Visiting Nurses Association, Richland Bank, Mechanics Bank, Ohio Health, and the Area Agency on Aging. Seriously, I couldn't be more grateful to our community for believing in what we do here just as hard as we do. For more information about our newsroom partners and our solutions journalism work, visit richlandsource.com/solutions. Now let's get back to the podcast. All right, guys, welcome back to the Why the Hell Am I Here podcast. As you've been listening, we're here with Thomas Palmer today. He currently is the law director for the city of Galion, has moved all over the place throughout his education and career, including a couple years in Paris, France, which I'm sure was amazing. At this point in the story, we are talking about how you've graduated from the Ohio State University Law School in 1992, was in private practice for a long time, and then decided to run, and then eventually was elected law director in 2013 and started your law director career in 2014. So, I mean, at what point do you decide maybe public office is the way to go?
That's a really good question. At no point. Well, no, seriously, Brittany, at no point did I ever sit down and say, oh, I want to do public office. That sounds like a really exciting thing to do. It was a combination of circumstances that brought me to that point.
Yeah.
I saw city government. I had been covering it for a local media site in Galion for several years. And I was just frustrated, as journalists tend to be, with not knowing what's going on and not being able to get to the bottom of things. Mm-hmm. And that was part of it, I suppose. Part of it was just the activity that was going on in Galion at the time. Galion had just transformed its city government structure for the first time in 25 years. And it became one of the only cities in Ohio that's ever gone from a charter community to a statutory community.
Whoa.
In fact, I think right now I'm probably the only, this is sort of, again, urban legend, but I think it's probably true. I'm the only living law director in Ohio that's had the experience of helping to guide the ordinance transformation from one form of government, that form of government, back to a statutory form of government. So it was a challenge. I cared about this community. I cared about many of the community issues that were involved, and I thought I could do a good job. And I was asked to run by several people I trust and like, and I decided to do it, not knowing what my chances were.
At that point, how long had you been living in Galion?
We moved in 92, in November of 92. So it would have been all that time until 2013 when I ran.
Yeah. I'm like 20-something.
19.
Yeah, there we go. My math is...
No, 21. You were right the first time. I'm sorry.
So I want to go back for a second because you mentioned that you were covering Galion as a journalist for a while. At no point yet have we talked about like you being interested in journalism or writing at all. So how did that part of your life come about?
Well, about 2007, 2008, there were a couple of community issues in Galion that I became very involved with. And one of the frustrations in that involvement was the fact that Galion at the time really only had a limited number of ways for us to talk to each other as a community. Galion is a unique community in its situation. We're in the corner of a county. We are, in many aspects, a suburb of Mansfield. We're certainly part of the Mansfield demographic in terms of the economy. And we only had one paper, and the paper was cutting back and the circulation was going down. And so there was a question about how do we talk to each other as a community? How can we move forward as a community if we can't talk, if we can't have a conversation? So I thought, I'm going to make something that allows the community to have a conversation. So Galion Live was born, and it became really successful. And I was really proud of it. And so I was practicing law on the side, and then Galion Live came on, and then Galion Live was making money. And I was suddenly realizing, I'm involved in local media. Fantastic. And I became an avid student of local media. I was passionate about following local media gurus and people involved in cutting-edge journalism across the country. And at the time, this was, you probably know about Lion, local.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're part of Lion.
Yes.
Which is local independent online news.
Right.
By the way, for listeners who don't know.
And I have this claim to fame of being the person that first told Jay Allred of Richland Source about Lion. But the precursor of Lion was called Authentically Local, I think, was getting on board. We were talking to each other as journalists, publishers across the country. And I was a part of that. And it was intoxicating to me. I'm preoccupied with, and I still am, with finding the next and best way for communities to come together, to have conversations and to share information. Mm-hmm. I'm just obsessed with that concept.
Yeah.
So I'm always, from a technological point of view, when I was doing Galion Live, I taught myself to code because I knew the expense of hiring a coder, hiring someone to do the tech work. I wasn't going to have that, so I taught myself to code. Mm-hmm. So all the technology was always in-house, and what I'm doing now with the sites I run now, it's all in-house. Mm-hmm. So if there's a technological issue, it's my fault if it's not working, but I can also be a part of the solution and being creative with it.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. I know that's one of the things, Richland Source, we are lucky that we're all independent and local. So, we have that same thing, but I know, just from speaking with journalists who do work for, the bigger corporations, that's frustrating to not have that in-house and not those decisions not being made locally. So oftentimes by someone who's not even familiar with the community. That can be really, I know I'd be frustrated with that.
Absolutely the case. Just a case in point, earlier this year, I think it was, that the South by Southwest team went to Austin. Mm-hmm. And 1812 Blockhouse was one of the sites that I publish, and that's about 2 years old. I saw all the activity going there, and I was a big supporter of that concept. I thought it was great what the team was doing, and they were using a hashtag, and they were talking back and forth. And I thought, no one's capturing this. Why aren't they capturing this? Because people would find it interesting to follow the conversations going on about the people independently talking about their experiences with South by Southwest as they were attending workshops. They were including the hashtag, but no one was bringing them all together so someone could have that experience of being a part of the team themselves. Mm-hmm. So 1812 Blockhouse did because all the technology is in-house, I just decided I found a platform that would work. I ran it through the site and captured all those, and then it got really popular because people were following what everyone was doing.
Mm-hmm. I love that. They were writing their blogs that we would post, but it's not the same as, watching that happen live.
Right.
And watching,
I think so.
The live tweets, which I think is really exciting. I want to go back for a minute because, you mentioned you started Galleon Live.
Right.
I know for a little bit you guys also had, what was it called? Mid-Ohio Live. Which was more Mansfield focused as well. But Galleon Live is really how as far as I know, first became connected with Richland Source as a brand.
Absolutely the case.
So can we talk about that? Like how, Galleon Live, because Galleon Live eventually became Crawford Source.
What happened was it was all a matter of timing, Brittany.
Yeah.
What happened was it all kind of coalesced and came together. Richland Source, that thing was founded or started, went live at least, in 2013. Mm-hmm. And that was the year I ran for election. And it was an ethical thing that I had to let Galleon Live go.
Right.
I can't cover local politics and be the law director for the city and be legal counsel for the city. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I knew that. And
huge conflict of interest there.
Huge problem. So I knew it was going to have to go away, and I really didn't want it. It was my baby.
Yeah, right.
And I had, I don't know, 5,000 or 6,000, I don't remember what it was, but thousands of social media followers, and it was for a small town. That's not bad at the time. So I thought, I don't want to see this die. And someone mentioned to me at the time, well, Jay with Richland Source said they might be interested. And I thought, I'm not letting this information go by. So I contacted Jay, and I don't remember how many times Jay and I had coffee or lunch over the next few months, and we hammered out this issue or that issue, and we entered into a non-disclosure agreement so that I could give him all my, very confidential business information with the site so he could see all this and make a decision. And then I had a lunch eventually with he and Carl Ferniak, and we made a decision to sell. Mm-hmm. So Galleon Live, the way I look at it, the way it was described to me at the time was Galleon Live was facilitated Richland Source's entry into Crawford County.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think that's true. I have a couple thoughts on that. First of all, I will say timeline-wise, Richland Source launched in 2013. You were elected in 2013.
Right.
You started your term in 2014.
Right.
January 2014 is when I came on.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I remember, when it was exciting because it meant we were growing, and it meant, we are to this point where we can acquire other properties and like grow into outside of Richland County. And it was all very exciting, but it was all very stressful because it was like, all right, well, we're not growing in team size, so now we're just doubling our workload, basically.
Oh, yeah.
I've always wanted to ask you this. Did it drive you crazy that now you had all of the inside information that you wanted as a journalist, but you weren't allowed to report it when you got elected?
That is one of I was thinking about this, and anticipating there's no way to prepare for one of these kinds of interviews, but I thought, well, there's two things I hate about my job. If I'm asked about I love all the other aspects.
Yeah.
The first is I hate politics. So and
politics is that beast.
Yes. And fortunately in Galleon we're nonpartisan government, so I don't have to declare party affiliation. Not that would be a problem, but it just brings this level of politics. I don't even like the politics with nonpartisan. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is exactly what you just said. I had thought of that. It was so horrible. I know everything going on with the city now. Not literally everything, but 99% of it. And I can't tell anybody.
Right. Yeah.
Much less report on it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That to me, I've always wanted to ask you that because I thought, oh my gosh,
it's so true.
That would drive me crazy. Like, because it's like
so
you said, that's
true.
kind of the reason why you wanted to run is to
Yes.
get these questions answered, and now the questions are answered, but you can't tell anyone about it.
Yes, that's why I will look to another city to start a second site. Another site, and I entered into a non-compete clause with Richland Source when I sold Guyan Live to Richland Source, and that expired in June of 2016. And I went, oh, now's the chance. But it's the same thing it was before. What I did was I didn't do anything right away because I thought I had to become a student again. I had just kind of separated myself from the whole media world, and I thought I've got to look to see if there's something out there as a model or new ways of doing things, or else I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
It's not going to be exciting. It's not going to give me, it's not going to be edifying. And I found some really exciting things. So that's why I decided to do it again.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you're talking about that clause expiring in 2016, and then you said 1812 Blockhouse is 2 years old. So that happened pretty much immediately.
Well, no, honestly, it was until September. It was born in September of 16, and it's 2 years old now. And yeah.
So for those who don't know, tell us what 1812 Blockhouse is.
1812 Blockhouse is a local independent online news site that covers Richland County, specifically Richland County. And it has now a sister site called 1808 Delaware that started 2 months ago in Delaware County. What the sort of difference is between 1812 Blockhouse and Richland Source, but also the News Journal and MFD and others, is that not only do we cover stories, but we collate the stories of others. Every single day on 1812 Blockhouse, you will find links to Richland Source. Every single day. And that's because what Richland Source covers, no site, even Richland Source, can't cover everything.
Sure.
I'm constantly reading things on MFD or News Journal that Richland Source hasn't covered and vice versa. That's kind of what the idea was behind it. And there are a couple of sites in the country. Billy Penn is one it's called in
Billy
Philadelphia.
Penn's great.
Yeah. Billy Penn, and now that Billy Penn has two other sites, one in Pittsburgh, one in Denver. And they do this. They collect and share news from other sources. It's sort of like the old, you ever seen the movie Miracle on 34th Street?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, there's two versions, the old one, the black and white one, and the new one. And at one point, I don't remember if he works for Macy's or Gimbel's, but Santa Claus ends up telling them about the deals at the other store and gets in trouble for doing that.
Yes.
I happen to think for a news consumer, finding out what the other store or sharing what the other store is doing is a positive thing.
Fun fact, I actually was in the stage version of Miracle on 34th at
Get
the
out of
Playhouse.
here.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Fantastic.
So yes, I'm intimately familiar with
Yeah,
that.
well, you know the story there. That's what Santa did.
Yeah, you know Carl Hunnell was Santa Claus.
Was he?
He was. He has the look, you know?
Yeah, I suppose so. Now that I think about it. That's a concept.
But that's the interest. I mean, we talk about that all the time about how, like, instead of how we need something like that, instead of us trying to reinvent the wheel on certain stories, why not just share excellent journalism that's being done? Unfortunately, you know, the nature of the beast, you know, we have to make money. We have to pay my paycheck. So it's, you know, it's a little difficult to think about from a competitive standpoint doing that. But having a site like 1812 Blockhouse that is that conglomerate where if you want to know about local news, that's where you go.
Right.
I think it's a great idea.
Yep. And it, you know, it's like the Google search engine. Google search engine fulfills the service of bringing things together and then leading them to other places. And so people click every day, I'm sure, from 1812 to Richland Source and the others. And, you know, but at the same time, I want to say, I'm still kind of like doing the old-fashioned stuff too.
Yeah.
And I
boots on the ground reporting kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, to the extent I can, you know, as an avocation, not total vocation. Although 1812 is making money, I love photography. I've gotten into Instagram and really want to bump up that some more. And I'm having fun again.
Yeah, which, you know, is the goal, right?
Yes, it
In
is. It is. I'm having fun. I'm finding new ideas. I'm really obsessed now. My current obsession, I'm using the word obsessed a lot now. It sounds like I'm obsessed, is with democratizing news, both in the collection of news and also even in the advertising area.
Democratizing news.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I'm really into this concept right now. I'm giving you a little tip off.
Uh-huh.
I'm
fascinated.
Well, that means there's an old concept called citizen journalism.
Yes, there is.
And it was really sort of a thing for a while. It was like solutions journalism. I mean, it's like a thing, and people follow that and they'll use that model and that construct. And then with citizen journalism, it went away for a while as an often talked about topic.
Which, for those who don't know, what is citizen journalism?
Citizen journalism is basically recognizing the fact that people report news every day in their own lives. So that means that when you're at a meeting and you're tweeting from that meeting and you're tweeting things, it means that if you're taking pictures at a school event, you're reporting news and people are getting their news that way. And it's just merely a recognition of the fact that the nature of news reporting is changing because the nature of news collection is changing. And what citizen journalism is simply an apparatus to sort of take all that and make it accessible to people.
So how does that fit into this idea of democratizing?
Because, I won't share with you confidential business information right now on this, but if I were to tell you the amount of money I've spent in the last 2 years on that site, it would shock you. I know it would. I don't see, as we move forward as a I was going to say civilization, but that's mighty highbrow. But as we move forward together, all of us, the traditional legacy media model isn't working anymore. It's not financially sustainable. So there has to be answers looked at. And to my mind, that net has to be cast wide. And so there's no reason to look at ways of doing this that don't reduce the cost. Because that's a way, there are a lot, and I'm telling you, I'm talking to you and I'm thinking you know all this already. But there are news deserts all over the United States.
Absolutely, yes.
There are places that aren't being reached. And one of the reasons they're not being reached is because it's too cost prohibitive to do all this. What if we lower the cost threshold dramatically?
This is very intriguing. And, I don't think it's too highbrow to say you should talk about civilization moving forward because we all know that the media landscape is changing and it's changing fast and it's changing all the time.
Yes.
Ugh. I graduated college with my journalism degree in 2012. And even now, things that they're teaching in school, so much has changed already. And I remember the biggest lesson that I think I learned in journalism school was that you have to be a jack of all trades. That
right.
I am really grateful that I learned a little bit about coding and about photography and about video and about writing just to survive in, the industry the way it is right now. So
absolutely. I remember when Gannett, which owns the Mansfield News Journal and Bucyrus Telegraph Forum and a lot of other papers around here, when Gannett reporters were first given their cell phones and they were told, use this, and this was a new thing. And this was about the time you were talking about, Brittany, when you were saying you graduated in 2012. It was right about that time. And they're all walking around with these things not knowing what to do. But they were expected to use these to collect and to share news.
I remember one of my journalism classes required me to create a Twitter account. And I was why? This is stupid. I don't ever use Twitter, and now I'm on it every day. So
my son would tell you, he laughs at me as being a curmudgeon all the time. When Twitter first came out, I said, this will never go anywhere. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And like you, I'm on it every single day.
Yep, every day. It's crazy. So, okay, so we've got, you've got the media companies, right?
Yep.
That we're doing currently. You've got another term as law director.
Yep.
Obviously hoping the Blockhouse to grow, right? Is that the goal? Or is it to sustain itself,
It's to make a difference.
Yeah.
I don't want to be altruist, sounding like money isn't at all a consideration. But it really is to experiment, to do things to bring people closer to the information. It could not make me $100,000 a year and I would still be happy. But if this model works, it's because this first model worked that I went to Delaware.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if it works in Mansfield, let me tell you, Mansfield and Delaware are two different places. and I'm not talking about economies or anything here. I mean, there are obviously differences there. Delaware is obviously a satellite of Columbus, much more than Mansfield is more standalone. But the real difference is how people get their news. And I see that now and you would have to be involved in it to try and collect news to see this. Delaware doesn't have Richland Source, or it doesn't have WMFD, and it doesn't have the News Journal. It has a single paper, the Delaware Gazette. It has a suburban set of papers from Columbus. But many more people get their news from social media in Delaware County than Richland County.
Wow.
So again, what I want to do is to see if these models work and then to take them on the road, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Just because it sounds like fun.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring this full circle then. We talked about being a musical family.
Sure.
The other thing that you do currently, which is every other Sunday, right?
Well, yeah. And I've been doing that for 20 years now, basically. I'm an organist.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically a pianist. And I got roped into trying organ, and then I got proficient on it. So, yeah, I'm the organist every other Sunday at First Lutheran in Galion. Love it. Love the people there. Love liturgical music. Love church music. I'm actually an Episcopalian, which not everyone can say, but I've been Episcopalian now for 20 years. So, yes, I'm a former Mormon Episcopalian. But the Episcopal Church in Galion closed, so I had to find another home, and so I ended up playing at First Lutheran, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Always musical, though, right? Even as, because you said your whole family is musical,
my gosh.
Going back generations.
Yeah, my great-grandfather was a famous hymn writer.
Wow.
One of my great-grandfathers, and wrote several hundred published hymns, and it's just been handed down generation to generation, and so I came by it naturally. But it's a big part of my life, and I don't know what you do, Brittany, when you're really stressed. If there's a place you go to or a setting you try and make at home or whatever it is, you listen to relaxing music maybe, or you have comfort foods or whatever it happens to be. For me, the fact that I have a key in my pocket right now to First Lutheran Church, which has a magnificent piano, and the fact that I can go in there when I'm stressed and spend half an hour with no one around me and let out my emotions on that piano is monumentally important to me.
I'm thinking about all the things that you do, like, being a law director, being in charge of a media company, being an organist. Do you think it's all about, finding your joy and seeing what makes you happy and pursuing that when it comes to just life in general and looking at the things you do?
Sure. I think that's true. I find joy. Where I find joy, I run at it. My kids bring me joy. I have 2 wonderful children. My wife and I did a great job. And they're now in their 20s, and they're independent, creative, self-sustaining. They both have their own apartments, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. One is in a magnificent partnership. They're just great people, and that brings me joy. So, yeah, I think I run wherever I see that. Yeah. I run at it, and I think that motivates me. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. I think that's a good life philosophy in general. It's trying to find that happiness.
Right. Yep, couldn't agree more.
Wherever it is. Well, Thomas, this was a great conversation. Good. And I'm really glad that you came in. For people who want to learn more about, 1812 Blockhouse, for example, how can they find you?
1812blockhouse.com. Mm-hmm. It's there every single day. And then we're on Twitter, Instagram, mm-hmm. and all the rest at 1812 Blockhouse.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if people looked at either my Twitter feed at Brittany Schock or at Why the Hell Pod, you can see how this interview even came to be. So
we do kind of do that, And then if you really want to be nosy, I'm on Twitter, and you always see me chatting back and forth with Jay about journalism and local media. So. Yeah, I'm an open book.
Yep, come creep on us online. It's fine. And of course, if you want to listen to more Why the Hell Am I Here episodes, you can find us on richlandsource.com or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks again for being here, Thomas.
Absolutely. Pleasure.
Yeah, and everyone else, we'll see you next time.